Hey, fraud and audit friends. Listen, you've got to be careful where you sign your name because you could lose a lot, especially your home. That's what we're going to talk about today. Home is where the fraud is. Are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome to the Friday Fraudster podcast. Join them as they discuss sad, funny, and sometimes disturbing fraud stories. Be sure to catch past episodes on your favorite podcasting platform or go to www.fridayfraudster.com.
All right. So, you guys, you heard what I said in the beginning, right? You have to be careful where you sign your name because a lot is at stake nowadays. And I don't have anything else to say to intro this one. We're just gonna bring Christine up and we're gonna talk about this one because this one is very, very interesting. Christine,
Hello.
what's happening?
Catching up on work after having yesterday off. Hope everybody had a happy 4th.
Oh yeah, it is the 5th of July.
I should say for
Holiday
all of
time.
our US people watching.
Very true, very true. So now, Christine, you've owned a home before, right? And bought a couple of homes and stuff like that.
I'm on my I'm on my 4th home.
Ooh, you're on your 4th home. And,
But
and
I
the
did move
process.
states. I did move states, so keep
Ah,
that in perspective.
but the process of buying and selling is pretty easy, though, isn't it?
I think it is. I've been through it, but I also understand a lot of the mortgage documents that come with it because that's my field. So, yes, for me, totally understand it.
But for
What about you?
most people, I don't know. For me, it was easy too because when I bought my first home, I was working in the mortgage industry. I think it was 2002 or one, something like that. But when you talk to other people, the process is very, very difficult and oftentimes confusing, especially when you consider most people take out a loan and that loan is for 30 years.
Yep. It's a long loan to have, but I wouldn't
Yeah,
be able to afford ours without that.
that's true. Yeah. Here's the other interesting thing about it to me, though. So you pay and you pay and you pay and you pay down the balance that you owe. Now, every once in a while, you might face a situation where possibly you can't pay that balance, and then certain things might happen, like they could take your home away, and that's pretty bad, right? You know?
Yep, foreclosure. I have not dealt with it, but I've seen it happen, and it's not fun for anybody. I mean, I hope others understand. I mean, financial institutions don't enjoy foreclosing on homes either. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's a fun process for anybody.
I remember in 2008 when the last, financial crisis hit, seeing a lot of people losing their homes. And some of those people had been in those homes for 10, 20, 30 years and had not paid them off. And they had lost everything that they invested in those homes. And that's kind of sad.
It is. That's a lot of not just money, but time. I mean, you can't get that 10 years of what you stuck in back. And it's more than just, it's not even that they might have lost a job, they couldn't pay for it anymore. 2008 was crazy. I mean, values in homes completely plummeted. You lost that equity overnight, it seemed like.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then there are people who have actually paid off their homes, but then you still have to pay your city or county taxes. And if you don't pay your taxes on your home, the local government authority could come in and take your home from you.
Right. And a lot of times, if you already have your home paid off, unlike somebody who might have like a mortgage lender, if you don't automatically have your escrow set up where it takes it out of your payment and everything else. There's not a secondary person that's calling you up and saying, hey, your property taxes weren't paid. You need to pay it or you're in default on your mortgage, that sort of a thing. You don't have that secondary check. So if you're not opening your mail, I mean, nobody's going to come and knock on your door or call you and say you owe us money.
Yeah. Now you can set up an arrangement through an escrow agency, and they'll charge you a little bit more to do it, but they'll nag you and make sure that you set aside monthly payments, and then they'll actually pay your tax obligation for you. That would be what I would recommend. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because when you get a mortgage, you have a couple different things going on. You have the bank note, which you signed your name to say, I'm going to pay the bank X amount of dollars back over X number of years. But then you also have the deed, which is on file with your city or county, usually the county, which says, I have an ownership interest in this property.
Correct. They almost look identical.
They do. Those are two separate things, though, right? With two separate meanings altogether.
Yeah. So one's like your contract. Your note is your contract with your bank. And then your deed is equivalent to the title of your vehicle. That's the easiest way I can explain it.
You know, that. I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking of in my head, how do we explain this? But that was perfect. Yeah.
It just happens to be like a 12-page title. I don't know how many pages they are now. I don't know how many pages they are now.
But those two things are related but different, right? Because you could have someone who's on the deed who's actually not on the mortgage.
Depending on who you lend with, correct. Some financial institutions might require all owners of the property have to sign. I think all owners of the property have to sign onto the note, but not all people on the note have to be owners on the property. So an example is, let's say I take out a mortgage and my sister is joint on the mortgage with me and we're using the home as collateral, but my sister doesn't own the home. They would allow that, but all the owners on the home have to sign agreeing to put that home up for collateral on the note. Yes.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
You made sense to me, but we'll see if everybody else understands that. But I can tell you, the new scam now that's going around is people are now getting the deed changed. And here's what's interesting about this scam. Let's just talk about the significance of this scam. If you are not on the deed and you still have a mortgage note with the bank, technically, you still owe the bank that money because your signature is on the bank note, but you have no ownership claim to the property because you're not on the deed. And so some criminals, scam artists, have found ways to have the deeds changed in the local county records and have been able to or have attempted to take homes from people using this method.
It gives the whole new meaning to squatter, in my opinion.
That's exactly what it is.
Well, and it's not like you get a letter in the mail saying, hey, we finished transferring ownership of your home. It's just done.
Right. You have absolutely no idea that you no longer own your home. Yeah. So now, the other thing that they're doing too, though, is sometimes they'll come in and they'll get the county to change where the tax bill is sent to. And then they'll pay the tax bill for a couple of years. And then they'll say, because I've been paying the tax bill, I want you to now change the deed. So that's how they somehow get onto the deed sometimes, is through the tax bill. Because let's just be honest. If your house is paid off, like Christine just said, nobody's going to remind you to pay the tax bill. Now, if somebody else pays the tax bill for you, and then you call up to the county and say, "Is my tax bill paid?" and they say yes, you think to yourself, especially if you're elderly, "Oh, I must have paid it and
Mhm.
forgotten about it." And so for 1, 2, maybe 3 years, somebody else pays your tax bill, which is not going to be that much, especially if your house is valuable. Then on that second, third, or fourth year, they go to the county and say, "We want you to change the deed over to the rightful owner. You see, we've been paying the tax bill for all this time, so you should be able to just switch it over." And they do.
Mhm.
And then somebody is out of a home.
Well, and I've also seen it as well. In certain states, there are people that will go look at properties and see who's behind on their taxes. And once it gets to so many years, somebody can actually just go and pay your tax bill, and now the property is theirs.
Yeah. Now, that brings up another one. Now, that is actually legal, though. That's not illegal. That, you know,
Correct.
the
There's
the
no fraud
county,
there.
exactly. The county will put your home up for sale for the cost of the taxes, right? You pay the taxes off. Now, here's what a lot of people don't know, because there's a big business in doing this. So, if the county wants to collect taxes in exchange for your home, when you eventually buy that property, the county is only owed the amount of the taxes. And on the county's books is the rest of the money that you as the homeowner are entitled to. So here's a business that people have started. They go in and they look at how many tax lien sales have occurred. Then they see how much money is still left on the county books. Then they contact the rightful owner and say, "For 10%, I'll get you your money." When all the rightful owner actually has to do is call the county themselves and they can get their money. Now, I'm not mad at this business model because it's really just linking up two parties who have a need. The county needs to get that money off their books and back to the rightful owner. The rightful owner needs their money. This person is saying, "I'll help you with the paperwork for 10%.
Yeah.
Gotta love America. Gotta love America. Now, Marsha is saying they do that in Jamaica as well, especially if the owners are abroad. Oh, yeah, are abroad and leave family in the house. When they return, they don't own the home anymore. Oh, wow, that's interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. The things you learn from your international audience, right? Now, today's story is actually a little bit of good news, kind of.
Mhm.
We covered the story before of a young lady who lost her home because she didn't pay the taxes and because the deed was turned over to someone else. In today's story, we actually have someone who was allegedly the victim of quit claim deed fraud, but she won her house back.
Yep.
So that's a little bit of good news. Now, before we get into that story, let me tell you guys, I actually have a little bit of experience with this. And let me tell you, get inside the mind of fraudsters and how they work. So I had a property
Okay.
and I was going to transfer my interest in the property, both physical interest, the deed, as well
Okay.
as financial interest, the note. Right? This was a settlement agreement where I was going to, hey, take the property.
Okay.
I get an email from the other party's attorney saying, "You need to sign this quit claim deed." And it was attached as in an email. Actually, that document came through my attorney. So I write my attorney back and I say, "I am not signing this unless that piece of property gets refinanced and my name is removed from the financial obligation."
Okay.
Now, makes sense, right?
Hmm.
My attorney in turn was like, "Well, what's the harm in signing it?" And I'm like, "Wait a minute. Did you just graduate college and pass the bar?" So I'm writing my own attorney back and I'm saying to him, "You understand, if I sign a quit claim deed, I no longer have an ownership interest in the physical property, but I'm still on the note. So in theory, the bank could come after me for a property that I don't own now, So they can't take the property and collect the money that's owed to them. That's not
Mhm.
how this works. Those two things have to go hand in hand. The quitclaim deed goes hand in hand with the refinancing of that property. So no, I'm not signing this. So I say that to my attorney, and then he charges me about $1,000 to go back to the other party's attorney, and they talk again behind the scenes. So my attorney comes back to me and says, "Well, what would it take for you to sign this?" And I told my attorney, "I'm not being difficult. Put me in touch with the lender so that I can talk to the lender to make sure that this property is going to be refinanced." Don't you think that's well within my rights, Christine?
Yeah, I don't think you were asking for a whole lot. You're just like, you want my name off the property, take my name off the loan. I don't see how that's a huge, I think that's a very, who wouldn't require that?
Who wouldn't require that? Thank you. It just
Right.
makes perfect sense. So now here's what ended up happening. Finally, I get an email from my attorney, and it's the name and phone number of the mortgage company that's going to refinance this particular piece of property.
Okay.
So I call up the mortgage company and I say, "Hey, I've been getting harassed by this other attorney saying that you all need me to sign a quitclaim deed." And the person at the mortgage company said, "No, we've been trying to get in touch with you for a few weeks. We've just said that we need your name and number." And I said, "Well, ma'am, I apologize. I just got your name and number today." And she said, "Oh,
Oh.
well, that's odd." So I said, "Well, what do you need from me?" She proceeded to tell me that there were a whole slew of documents that I needed to sign, including the quitclaim deed. And so I asked the same question I asked my attorney:
Mhm.
how do we make sure my name is off of the note at the bank? And she said, "Oh, no, we do all of that together. So if the loan does not close and it's not refinanced, then
Mhm.
we don't provide the quit claim deed." I said, "Thank you, ma'am. That makes a whole lot of sense." Now, let's get down to the bigger story and to why this is happening. You see, when you deal with con artists, people who are not honest and nefarious, they like to bring in third parties. They do this thing
Incredible.
called triangulation. They do this thing called triangulation. They bring in third parties into the mix and they try to slander your name and make you look bad so that you can be complicit in their fraud. So now, this is why I'm saying this. My lesson to anybody who is facing something potentially like this: I want you to ask yourself 4 questions before you go through with anything.
Hmm.
Now, first question I want you to ask yourself is, what does the other party stand to gain by what they're asking me to do, from what they're asking me to do? What does the other party stand to gain? Because when we talk about this lady who was the victim of this fraud in this case, or me in the case I just told you all about, what the other party stood to gain was a property free and clear where somebody else could have still been on the hook to pay the mortgage obligation, right? Now, the second question I want you to ask yourself is, what does the other party stand to lose? See, the other party didn't stand to lose anything because they brought in an attorney to try and bully me into signing a document that I refused to sign. Now,
Mhm.
the third question I want you to ask yourself is, what do you stand to lose? Because, see, what I stood to lose was physical ownership in a property, which didn't really care about, right? But also financial freedom from the property. That's what I stood to lose. And then the next question is, what do you stand to gain? So,
Mhm.
Christine, I see you looking confused. See, con artists work in mysterious ways.
I know. I guess there's a part of me that's just wondering how. So, like, there was a lien on the property, right? That lien is listed on that deed.
Correct.
So, even if you would sign that claim deed or quit claim deed, like, how do they get that lien released? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, wouldn't that financial institution have to somehow approve that new ownership?
No, not when it comes to the actual deed that's on file with the county. Those are two separate documents.
So their lien would still be on there. It would
Right.
just, the ownership would change and then you would still be stuck with a loan. The only
Correct.
repercussions would be if you didn't pay it, they could go back after that property.
No. They would go back after me because I'm no longer an owner of that property because the deed would have released me as ownership from the property.
Okay.
So they would have been looking for the money from me directly without having the property as collateral to take away and sell because I no longer had an interest in the property.
Oh, I feel like that's a huge risk for financial institutions then. Now they have to worry about the scam happening and they lose. Oh,
It
yeah.
is a huge risk for financial institutions, always has been, but most times people don't do anything like this. Brenda's here. Brent says, did the lien have a due on sale clause? I don't think so.
Well, and
So,
even on those quit claims, it doesn't necessarily mean that the property was sold. They don't even
correct.
have to exchange money.
Correct. Quit claims have nothing to do with the sale for real. It just has to do with the ownership from the county government standpoint.
Yeah, so like you can quit claim somebody off of a property if like they've passed away. Like you can do a lot of that stuff. Parents might do
Correct.
it if they're transferring property. So like my parents did a quit claim deed to my sister on 10 acres they had up north to her and her
There you
husband.
go.
But they
Yeah,
didn't sell it to each other.
exactly. They just gave her the property for the purposes of the county so that the county would know who to tax and who the owner was.
Correct.
Right. So imagine now being on a loan for a piece of property that you are no longer listed as the owner from the county standpoint.
Now you're making me want to check the state of Wisconsin website and still make sure that I'm the owner.
And that was going to be my other tip to people. Periodically check to see if you are still the owner, quote unquote, of your property. Also check to see if you are still listed as the person responsible for the taxes. So let's talk about the young lady in today's story. The young lady in today's story was in a little bit of trouble because the property that she owned, she actually did owe back taxes on. And so what happened was another company ended up getting its name put on the deed for the property. Now, she was in the middle of negotiating with a lender and setting up financial arrangements to pay the back taxes. She owed about $14,000 on the property. And so she was looking at getting into a financial arrangement where she was paying the taxes back. Now, at the same while she was doing this, discovered that she was no longer on the deed and she was trying to figure out how that happened. Well, they went and they talked to the notary who supposedly signed the deed, and the notary was like, I don't remember executing this agreement. And so she took it to court, and the court ended up siding in her favor. Actually, let's go back a little bit. She discovered that she was no longer on the deed to the home because she got served papers to come to court regarding the tax liability.
And I think that's where I was kind of confused in the story, is if she was removed off, how did they contact her?
Well, it looks like at some point a lender was suing, and the company that was on the deed was like, wait a minute, no. That's what it looked like. I actually read some of the court documents and I was like, whoa, this is insane. And I did not know that people could actually do this.
Yeah. And my other question I have, so I kind of just try to look at everything. If she thought that she still owned, and maybe because you read the court, if she owned the property and everything else, was she not paying those property taxes every year? Or did she think she had them? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if she owned that property.
Yeah. From what I can tell, she was not paying them. And so here's the way it works, though. If you don't pay them, the local government will give you a certain amount of time before they actually sell the property. Now, in the meantime, you can strike a deal to set up payment plans to pay it back, not necessarily through that government authority, but through a third party who will then pay that, and then you owe the third party. So she definitely was behind on the taxes. However, no sale had occurred from the government to any entity to collect the past due money. So she should have still been the owner of that property on the deed, and the court just recently sided with her on that.
Yeah, because I think that's just what I was just like confused about.
Yeah. So she did have past due taxes, yes.
Okay. Which, FYI, everybody, she was dealing with cancer as well. So I can understand when you're dealing with something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? People go through hardships. I just
Oh
was
yeah.
worried. I was just sitting here thinking, well, was she paying it every single year? And if that was the case, how did it get behind on 13,000?
Right.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
but
no,
then I was
she
kind of reading it like, was she supposed to buy the house? And then she backed out. And then he put her on the quit claim deed. And that's how she got brought into court. But I kept on saying it was her house. So,
yeah. It was family property. It looks like it was in her family, and someone passed away. I don't know, bless you. I don't know if it was her husband or parents or grandparents, but it was family property that she owned, and she got behind on the taxes. And the local government authority, to their credit, they didn't just swoop in and take it. They gave her
mhm.
ample opportunity, and she was paying it back. She was just behind. But at some point, there was a lawsuit, and she was named as one of the defendants in this lawsuit. And that's when she discovered that a quit claim deed had been done, and this other company who was now on the deed was actually suing her, and they were trying to take the home.
Okay. Yeah.
Isn't it crazy?
Well, it is because I mean that takes a lot of work. So, and I know I this is probably a lot easier than what people realize.
It is.
Period. Because from a fraud standpoint, right now anybody can search it up. They can pull copies of your deeds off of
Yep.
online. They can find out who you have your loan with. Huge thing if you have a home equity line of credit. I am a big proponent. If you have a home equity line of credit, ask your financial institution if they can completely cut off your capability of drawing off of your HELOC through your online banking, because that'll
Yep.
just open it up. They'll target you, hack into your online banking, transfer money off of your HELOC. They know what your limit is. They have all the information, that sort of stuff. But they also know what a notary signature is. And I worked at one financial institution that somebody mimicked a notary signature off of our deed documents to try and do a wire transfer. That fraud person, the person trying to commit fraud, just didn't realize that the bank that I worked at that held the deed on the mortgage and the notary worked at the same financial institution. So when we had seen that come through, we're like, well, we don't require a notary if one of our employees is filling out the paperwork for you for a wire transfer. So they can, I mean, if you're a notary public, use your book, document it, because people can rip off your notary stamp. I mean,
Yep.
they're not the pressed ones on the paper anymore. They're all ink stamps.
Yeah. So now let's talk about this fraud in a different way too. I mentioned triangulation earlier. Let me talk
Yeah.
about what that is, because you can see what they did here was, after they committed the fraud, probably during too, they involved third parties to try and pressure the innocent party to do things that they should not do. And that's simply all triangulation is. Think about when somebody says, anybody who's a parent,
Mm-hmm.
when a mom tells the kids, wait till your dad gets home. That's triangulation. They brought in the dad as the third party enforcer to enforce the rules against the other party, being the kids. Think about when somebody says, I'm going to call my attorney. Now, if
Right.
they're being dishonest, That's triangulation, because now they're bringing in an attorney or a legal system to strong arm you into doing something that you probably should not be doing. Now, here's the more relevant example that you can probably relate to. You call a company because of a customer service problem, and you talk to the first customer service rep, right? And the first
Mhm.
customer service rep is just horrible to you, just bad.
Oh,
And then they
yeah,
say something like, well, I'm only doing this because I'm going to get fired if I don't do this, or because my boss will come down on me. Now they're using their boss as that third party authority to triangulate with you to get you to do what it is that they want you to do. You have to watch for that in these fraud schemes when they start saying, and it's usually one of a few different things. They'll either bring in court system, God, or some other authority figure, right? They'll say, God doesn't want you to do this. And it could be something that's not a sin and nothing that, you know, or they'll tell you this is illegal when it is not
right.
illegal at all. So you have to watch for the triangulation that fraudsters use, because they'll bring up authority figures to try and force you to do something that you shouldn't otherwise do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we hear it all the time.
Yeah. So this young lady fortunately won her court case. And so what ended up happening was, again, she discovered that her property was fraudulently transferred via a quitclaim deed after she received a foreclosure notice. So that was the other thing too. She did receive a foreclosure notice. And so now the notarization of the deed was in question by the court, because the notary noted for foreclosure process. That's
Mhm.
how she got tipped off that something was wrong.
I mean, it's just how long was it going on? Oh, it was like over a decade, wasn't it?
Ooh, I don't know. That's a good question.
I feel like it was over a decade
Um,
before she finally realized it, which would correlate with you saying that a lot of times they'll pay those taxes for so many years. But it makes me wonder if it's because the guy died, the guy that did it. Because he passed away in 2017.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, he passed away in 2017. The house was still in their possession in 2010, but was transferred to the other company in 2012. So yeah, you're right. In 2017 is when, he died, and the property had accumulated more than $13,000 in delinquent taxes. And yeah, so wow. So they were on the deed for quite a long time before she discovered it. You're right. Wow.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're right. She didn't even know anything about it until it was the mortgage foreclosure case. So she probably wasn't getting anything. Everything was probably set up to a different address.
Yeah. 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 And you really have to watch that. Um I I've experienced where I had some friends of my family, not family directly, that were feuding over a piece of property, and one of them literally did go down to the to the county tax collector's office and put themselves on the taxes and paid the taxes for a couple of years, and then tried to get themselves put onto the deed so that they could take the property away.
That's just
And see, this
horrible.
prop it is, isn't it? It's horrible. Yeah. Well, and the thing about it is, this property was already paid off. So if the property is already paid off and you are on the name for the taxes and you are on the deed, essentially you are the owner of that property. There is no bank
Mhm.
note associated with it to prove your case.
Right. Um, Something along this line, and I'm sorry if I'm kind of squirreling out here, but um, titles for vehicles, we're noticing fraud on those as well,
Yep.
where people are falsifying and signing off on liens for
Yep.
financial institutions, walking into the DMV, getting a clear title, and then selling the vehicle that they have a loan on. and then just walking away.
Yep.
So for anybody in financial institutions, FYI about that, if you're not seeing it yet. I mean, that is a little bit more criminal as far as theft. I mean, I guess that's a lot to go through just to make like $15,000-$20,000.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that definitely was not off tangent. That was directly related. I mean, it it shows that there's a huge misalignment between governmental agencies and then financial institutions, which, granted, they are separate entities, right? So you don't necessarily want them in the business of the other. But at some point, there has to be some kind of an alignment, because think about this now. Think about if you are the victim of this kind of fraud, and then you don't have enough money because you're living paycheck to paycheck to actually go to court and settle this issue. You could be stuck simply because, now you could be in the right, but you could still be stuck simply because you don't have enough money to fight for what is right.
Right. Because she had to spend a lot of money for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded like she tried representing herself at first.
Yep.
But like, in all honesty, I feel like I know quite a bit about mortgages, deeds, all that stuff. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Right.
If I didn't have an attorney.
Yeah. And I think her saving grace was that notary who was like, I don't remember doing this. I think that was her saving grace. But imagine being put into a horrible situation and not being able to get out of it simply because you don't have enough money and you are actually in the right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm glad it all worked out for her.
Yeah.
But this wasn't an easy task, because I think one of the older, because you provided the news link from July 3rd of this year. She started dealing with this back in April of 2023. Yep. And she finally got her house back.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hoping she didn't get kicked out. I'm hoping the courts delayed everything until it was figured out. But even then, that's still a year, because I'm guessing she's not like she came up with $13,000 to pay for it. That's a whole nother year that you're paying fines, interest,
attorney fees, because now you have a lawyer. I mean,
right. And who's going to give that back? The guy that did the fraud is dead.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not like they're going to go, oh, I guess you just don't owe us. That's not going to happen.
So for those of you who have family members that are elderly, or if you just have any property that you own, periodically check to make sure that your name is the one listed as the person responsible for the taxes and the insurance. And also check the deed down at your local county, whatever it's called. In different cities, it's called different. Some cities call it the property appraiser. Whatever it's called, just check periodically, because these types of scams, they aren't going to get any better. Let's just be honest. They're only going to get worse, especially when people figure out how easy some of them are.
Yeah, just search for your property tax portal. It'll pop up really fast, because then they sit there and think you're making a property tax payment. Oh, you're going to pay us? That's one website will let you search and find property and give us money.
That's true. And then I would really suggest too, for those whose homes aren't paid off, pay your taxes in escrow so that somebody else is doing it for you, because they'll do the recalculations for you. They'll tell you when it goes down. You also notice whenever it's paid. What is it? They have to notify you within 30 days or 60 days or something like that whenever it's paid?
You get an annual escrow statement. So your homeowner's insurance, if you also do your homeowner's insurance and your property taxes, you should still get your notification letter in the mail that those are due. But they should also be aware of who your mortgage holder is, and that you have an escrow, and then they pay it. And then once a year, you should be getting your escrow statement. So then it'll show you what you put in, what they paid out, if there's any adjustment. I could say if there's any overage, but I have never had an overage in like the last 5, 6, 10 years. I don't know. Property taxes keep going up.
Right.
But yeah, so you have that option. Check your state. A lot of states require them to pay dividends on your escrow. So Wisconsin was one where they required it up until I think 2017, 2018. Now the financial institutions aren't required to pay escrow or in dividends on your escrow unless it's a required escrow. So if you have like a high, an HPML mortgage, something like that, although a lot of the financial institutions in the area will just pay you dividends anyways, because why not do it to all rather than starting to sort that stuff out? So, and our state actually assigns the dividend rate every year. So it's the financial institutions can't decide what it is. The state does. So like right now, I have escrow on my house. I don't pay the mortgage company anything to maintain my escrow account. They do it for free.
Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense, right? Because they're making money off the money that you have with them. So.
And for me, in all honesty, like I know I could keep that money separate and make a little bit of money off of it. To me, it's not worth my time. Like it's something I don't have to worry about every year. So it makes me happy.
Okay, so listen, we've got some comments coming in over here on LinkedIn that are not coming up for me in my broadcasting platform. So I just missed a whole lot of people. Carol is here today. And Lisa says, man in the middle fraud. Her comment didn't come up at all over here. She also said, oh, this is interesting. She also said many firms out here are now selling title lock services. Yeah. To prevent others from taking your home via a quick claim deed. Yeah. And then Lisa also said she just recently checked with her county to ensure that her deed is still in her name. And then, Abbas, my man Abbas is here from Oman. He said, hey, Rob, but yeah, I don't know what's going on over here in StreamYard, but none of those comments popped up for me. And that's a little upsetting when you're trying to run a live show here.
No. Well, one of the cool things to come out of this. So I know that government agencies, financial institutions, they're not on all the same wavelength. Since this has happened, the county that it's at, was it the records clerk? He is working on helping to pass a law to help, because they're seeing a spike in the county that this woman was in. Yep. So to help to reduce those numbers. So they're looking to essentially kind of do what the post office does right now. So if you would change your address with the post office, they would send you a letter. So you would receive a letter or an email or a text message to let you know that someone submitted some type of paperwork on your property for you. Which I think is a great tool. State of Wisconsin is actually working because of those title issues that I was talking about. Well, right now, financial institutions, we put our liens on the vehicles electronically. We don't do any paper submissions anymore. So now the state of Wisconsin is looking to require the only time that a lien can be released on a Wisconsin title is through the DMV site, through your financial institution's login. So there is no capability of bringing a paper title in, because it's been, oh my gosh, well over a decade since we got rid of paper titles for financial institutions. So if your bank or credit union has a title on your vehicle, they don't get a paper title because we are a lien holding state. So whoever has a lien on the property is the person who has the title. The owner does not get a copy of it. So
Very interesting.
yeah, so I think a lot of this type of fraud could be significantly reduced if technology could be applied effectively. And I don't think it has to be anything expensive.
It doesn't. I mean, to your point, a letter saying, "Hey, someone is attempting to do this action." Take it a step further: an email and a text message, because nowadays we do know that text response rates or open rates are at like 90%. So, I, yeah, make people aware of these types of things. Like I said, we've read enough stories about this happening. I have a little bit of personal experience with it, and the fraudsters will do anything that they can. Because I'll just say this. Here's the other thing: fraudsters want one of a few different things, or maybe several different things from you, right? Either they want some property, or they want some money, or they just want to besmirch your name and reputation. That's a fraud too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Some Yeah, sometimes they want all three, and sometimes if they can do one, it can lead to the other. So what I mean by that is, if someone can besmirch your name, they can possibly get some money out of you. Or if somebody can go to court and get some money from you, they can then turn around and besmirch your name, even if they're wrong. So those, I think we only think about usually just property or money, but we forget about reputation. We forget about the person's good name and character. But that's usually where it starts. And they do that by playing on ego.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, even if they besmirch, I'm guessing either they're really vindictive or they're going to get something out of it.
Exactly. They're going to get something out of it. And so Marsha asked the question, so if persons who work in the offices who know that the taxes are not being paid on the properties, would they pass that information to fraudsters? Now, here's what's interesting, Marsha. It's public information.
Mm-hmm.
Like, who's behind on their property taxes is public information. And so what a lot of people do, and it actually, okay, it's not all bad. Let's talk about some of the good. It actually can be helpful for business, because oftentimes when you're behind on taxes, people don't know what to do and they just sit there and suffer. And so there are businesses who go out there and they get those listings and they contact those people. They solicit them and say, "Hey, I can give you this loan for 1,000% interest." I'm sorry, that was a joke. But they offer to give them loans to help with the tax situation. And that actually is helpful. Now, the other side of it is the new business I talked about earlier that people were doing. When there is a tax lien placed by a local authority, and the house is up for sale, people can come in and buy the homes and then buy the homes from the government authority. The government authority is only supposed to keep the amount of the taxes that are past due. And so sitting on their books is the remaining amount. And you can match up, okay, the government has $100,000 sitting on their books for this one person who had their property taken. You can go find that person, and it's not illegal for you to take a finder's fee for just matching those people up. So there is some good for that information being public. Like with anything, right? There's a good side, there's a bad side. Like the force, right? There's a good side of the force, and then there's a dark side of the force.
Right. So it took me, from the time that Marsha posted that, I just found out there are 61 people in my town that are delinquent on some type of tax.
Ooh.
And I've got names, addresses, the amount of the liability, and the tax type. So this is including incomes, withholding sales tax, corporation business tax, sales, income, sales withholding. I mean, I can, there's some of these that I'm looking at these going, ooh, I know that company. Oh, I know that company.
Yeah.
But I can definitely tell you this. I mean, you're not going to be, I'm not going to be contacting any of the people on here that have a roofing company to come do my roof if I know they owe $150,000 in sales tax.
Well, and and that's where it gets bad though, because so like I work for one organization that was fighting tax battles for years because of a difference of opinion, and they eventually settled for far less than was being asked of them. So their name could appear on this list when they're actually not necessarily quote unquote guilty. And so that's why you have to really get all the facts to try and
Mhm.
figure out some of these situations. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, I'm a little surprised that I'm not seeing any past due property taxes. I could be in the wrong spot. Delinquent tax.
Ah, now Marsha's saying, okay, there in Toronto, there are people who lose their homes via fraudster real estate companies. Oh wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Mm.
see, as of January 1st, 2008, the Wisconsin Department of Revenue is required by Wisconsin state statutes to post on the internet a list of persons who owe delinquent taxes, interest, penalties, fees, and costs of more than $5,000, which are unpaid for more than 90 days after all appeal rights have expired.
It makes you wonder what's the purpose of that though. But okay, never mind. That's a whole
Shame.
nother. Yeah,
It's got
exactly.
to be shame.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, and they're required to post a separate list of the top 100 accounts.
Oh wow.
Ooh, there's some people that owe over $3 million.
Yeah. And some of them are probably actually fighting legal battles though, because again, like one of the companies I worked for, there was a difference in opinion about the inventory methodology used, which would have affected the taxes, right?
Mhm.
Now getting accounting nerd, right? But it was in dispute, you know? And that's I don't know. I don't necessarily believe in public shaming because you never know what the underlying situation is. Because what we do now is we run with headlines and don't
Mhm.
bother to look underneath the hood, especially when you think about the effect of 2020, 2021, 22, and 23. Like
Right.
that. Because if you think about it, during that period, what they have, they had like rent moratoriums in the US for about 2 years. People weren't required to pay rent. So think about what those landowners, those homeowners who were renting their homes and apartments out, they actually faced some problems because they couldn't pay the actual notes due because the government had a rent moratorium.
Oh, man.
So think about that. So you could be in that situation because of a law that prevented you from collecting from people who actually owed you.
Now, it does give you options to remove your name. You can pay the debt in full, file missing tax returns that result in account adjustments to zero, provide proof of payment, enter into a valid payment plan, submit a complete offer and compromise for wage earners and self-employed, or offer of compromise for businesses, or provide proof of bankruptcy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they do say that they'll get your name off the list by the next business day.
Oh wow, that's fast.
Wisconsin don't mess around.
I see. It's very, very interesting. Very interesting. Well, all right. Anything else for this episode?
No. If I'm guessing everybody that's listening, I mean, the states are going to be getting a nice little hit on their property tax searches.
Yep.
You can also check it for, you should be able to check it for your vehicles too if you really want to. I know we can here, but I've always found that Wisconsin is pretty very open records.
Yeah.
Without having to have an account. Like it feels like California, you have to like pay for every open record search. I know Wisconsin, I don't. I call it a CCAP. Now everybody's gonna CCAP me. I got a speeding ticket. I'll tell you guys right away. It does. It tells you everything.
Wow. Even speeding tickets. That.
Oh, seatbelt fines. If you get a $10 seatbelt fine, that hits your CCAP.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
That's a bit much, but you know. Mm.
It doesn't, like, to me, it really doesn't bother me. If you really
Marsha
want to
said
know.
Marsha said we have too many different laws. Yeah, each state
Yeah.
can, and there are 50 states, and then there's several territories too. So
If you want to, that is, I don't think I could ever work for a financial institution that is in California.
yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, not saying that their consumer rules and regulations aren't bad, just a lot.
There's a regulation for everything.
I mean, anybody in any state in the US just has to look at anything that they've purchased, and I can guarantee you on the ticket of your item, like if you bought furniture or something like that, there is some warning on there for state of California.
Yep. There is.
So
well,
keeps
all right,
it fun, Marsha. It keeps it fun.
keeps it dysfunctional, but
Yes.
yeah, it does. Well, all right, people, thank you for joining us for this episode, and we'll see you next week.
Have a